4 hours of talks between the United States and Russia have ended without a breakthrough on the crisis in Ukraine. After the meeting in Paris, the US Secretary of State John Kerry said talks were constructive but demanded that Moscow pull back its forces from Ukraine's eastern border. Meanwhile, the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said Moscow had agreed to work with the Ukrainian government on a number of issues. A warning: Bridget Kendall's report contains some flash photography.
A weary John Kerry arriving for crisis talks in Paris with Sergei Lavrov. These two know each other well, but that doesn't mean they can narrow the gap between the West and Russia. The United States wants Russia to stop intimidating Ukraine by massing its troops on the border. Russia wants Ukraine to become a looser federation, something the government in Kiev has already rejected. 4 hours of talks led to no breakthrough, and deep disagreements remain, like over Russia's annexation of Crimea and threatening use of its troops.
I made clear that the United States still considers the Russian actions to be illegal and illegitimate, and Russia's actions over the past several weeks have placed it at odds, obviously, with the rule of law and the international community, and we still believe on the wrong side of history.
Mr. Lavrov, meanwhile, seemed to signal Russia may now be willing to negotiate directly with the government in Kiev.
We
agreed to work with the Ukrainian government and with the Ukrainian people in a wider way to reach fulfillment of peace on priority areas such as minority rights, language rights, achieving disarmament of irregular forces and provocateurs, and achieving inclusive constitutional reform and conducting elections under international observation.
There are good reasons for Mr. Putin to try for a deal at this point, like the need to secure Crimea's water and energy supplies, even though Kiev says it wouldn't cut off Crimea and people it still sees as Ukrainian citizens. There have been blackouts. Then there's the bloodshed that could follow if Russia were to move into other parts of Ukraine. Taking Crimea may have been peaceful. Next time, there's likely to be Ukrainian resistance. And there's the economic cost and diplomatic isolation if Russia pushes this confrontation further. Moscow says sanctions so far have been laughable, but new sanctions would hit harder. But the Russian build-up, as in these pictures near Ukraine's border, tells a different story. Moscow says it's not planning to invade, but the West fears that if Mr. Putin doesn't get his way through diplomacy, he might decide only a military intervention would protect local Russian speakers. Bridget Kendall, BBC News.